Hello, YouTube fans, here again. And I figure why not? It's been a fun roller coaster talking about Bond, James Bond, meaning James Bond. Actors who were going to get the role of James Bond, and sadly never got the role. What I thought of the fucking stupid Hollywood, what I'm saying, people of the day will be offended. Well, fuck it, I'll offend. People don't offend. If people offend either, don't watch the film, don't watch me, don't watch anything. But we went for that issue. But this one's going to be an interesting one because I talked about Sam Neeson, what would have happened and how I felt, what would have happened if he was going to get the role. And I even talked about James Bolden, who was going to get offered the role, auditioned, and again, sadly never got the role. But this one I've not talked about, and it's actors who originally, believe it or not, originally was going to be offered the role, but for some reason or other reasons turned it down. They want anything to do with it. Turned it down. Said they'd probably do one, they'd do two, or they weren't going to do better. Right? And this is interesting. I remember looking at this, and some of it was interesting because I thought you will never believe in a million years who was actors who originally was going to play the role of Bond, James Bond. You won't believe it. So without ado, let's have a fun ride and have fun and look at actors who originally was going to be Bond, James Bond. One of them, when Sean Connery originally did the last Bond movie, what we all thought was going to be the last one, being You Only Live Twice. Originally, Adam West, not making this shit up, Adam West, Batman himself, was going to be offered the role of James Bond. Not bullshitting you, before George Lazenby, Adam West was originally going to be offered to play James Bond. And he was going to take the role. But they decided to do a third series, he was under contact, and they was going to do a third series of Batman. So Adam West had to go bye-bye and not take the role. Then, believe it or not, it was going to be offered to Timothy Dalton. People said, Timothy Dalton did play James Bond. Hear me out. A lot of people may know this now, it's old news, but Timothy Dalton in 1968 or 1969 was going to play James Bond. He was offered the role because he was a well-known Shakespearean actor then. But at the time, Timothy Dalton was in his 20s. He felt it was too long to play the role. I know it sounds funny, it sounds laughable, you look at it now. He felt it was too long to play that role, so he turned it down, believe it or not. He actually turned it down. It was only in his later years, when he was in his mid-40s, he took on that role. So instead it went to somebody else, which funny enough was in the late 20s, it was being George Lazenby. Then, what as we know, Sean Connery decided to prize his role. Now, we do know originally it was going to go to an American actor. I can't think of his fucking name now. It's going to do me head in, but he's been in a few things. He was in a TV show called Champlins, and he was in the original Psycho. Remember the scene with Norman Bates finds out that they're going to con him, and he has a fight with that guy, and Norman Bates knocks that fella out, and then he's going to come out, and that fella comes out and saves the day. Well, that actor originally was going to be James Bond in 1971, but sadly to say, decided to bring back Connery not to be. Then in 1972, they had two offers for a role to play James Bond, because we all know Sean Connery was not going to prize the role of James Bond. So one of them, believe it or not, was going to be Burt Reynolds. Not making this shit up, Burt Reynolds was offered the role. And I admit, he looked really good. He had the suit, he had the Besito, the dicky ball, the tie. And there's a bit of me that would have been interested to see what it would have been like. But looking at it now, you look at Burt Reynolds, you look at Smokey and the Bandit. Looking at Burt Reynolds now, you look at Cannonball 1, or films that say like Deliverance, or the list goes on. So At that time, they felt an American actor would not go for that role. But it's kind of funny because in 1972 to 1973, they were going to give the role, believe it or not, again to Clint Eastwood. Not making this shit up. Clint Eastwood was going to get the role of James Bond. Unlike Albert Potter decided Burt Reynolds would not be thinking, they really wanted Clint Eastwood. They offered Clint Eastwood a big dollop of DOS to play that role. But Timothy Dalton really did not want to pay Timothy Dalton. Duh. Clint Eastwood, I meant to say, really did not want to pay that role. Didn't want to pay it. His heart wasn't in it. He didn't feel comfortable wearing the mosquito, the dicky ball, the ties, and the lines after Sean Connery. And in one way, I look at Clint Eastwood, I look at him either in the spaghetti westerns, I look at him in films that say like his Dirty Harry films and other films. And if Harry would have took that role, he would have got the second sort of Dirty Harry film being Magnum Force or any of his other films. He's done in action, a Clint Eastwood when he's in his heyday. He was done in action films. He was done in his spaghetti westerns or his other cowboy films. But seeing Clint Eastwood saying them lines, my name's Bond, James Bond, it would have been laughable. Would have been. So I'm kind of happy that Roger Moore got the role. And we all know Roger Moore went on to play Bond. Now, we went for this one before, so I'll just do it a little bit. As we know, Roger Moore was going to do the last Bond movie, being For Your Eyes Only, and then the role was going to be given to James Bolden. And I felt he would have been ideal. He would have been good. He would have been brilliant as Bond. But we all know the history that Sean Connery was going to do a one-off, being Never Say Never Again. They were in a battle of Bond, so they begged Roger Moore to come back. They paid him a big dollop of money. I'm not going to say which one was the biggest hit, but we all know that's why James Bolden did not get that role. Then when Roger Moore went bye-bye, it was going to be given to Sam Neeson. You want to see a better review? Just what's the bottom about Sam Neeson? But we all know that was not to be. And we all know that it was going to be offered to Pierce Brosnan. But we all know Remington Steele had a contact. They decided to put it back on air, which I don't know why, because in 1987, that went bye-bye. And again, Timothy Dalton decided this time it'd be the right age, it'd be the right moment for him to do it. He decided to be James Bond. And the rest is history. Now, this is an interesting one. It's an interesting one because now I'm going to talk about actors who originally was going to be Bond before Connery. One of them, believe it or not, was going to be Frank Sinatra. Seriously, I know it sounds laughable looking at it, but Frank fucking Sinatra was going to be James Bond. And I'm kind of happy that happened there. Put my brain up this. I'm kind of happy that was not to be. Not to be. Frank Sinatra, I did it my way. Well, in this stage, it would not have been his way, and he would have been Bond. I mean, Frank Sinatra to me is a singer more than an actor. So I'm kind of thought it was a laughable and it was comical, but I'm kind of happy that was not to be. Back in 1962, I think they made the right choice. I think Connery, as another actor, would have loved to have been Bond, but turned it down. Didn't think he was good enough. Or he decided he was only going to do 2 Bond movies. He wanted someone who's going to be more into Bond. And as we all know, Sean Connery got to be Bond. Now, I do know that Albert R. Botley at the time wasn't keen on James Bond. I mean, James Bond's like, it's fucking me head up this. I mean to say, he wasn't keen on Sean Connery. And that's called him a typical truck driver, because that's one of his early jobs before he got in his acting career. And it pissed Connery off. So remember the bit in Dr. No where Connery looks really pissed off at Dr. No. And he said, I prefer the 53. And he thought he really did a good performance of being somebody pissed off. He wasn't acting. That was Connery being pissed off. And, you know what I mean, there was a lot of other offers of other actors to play the role of James Bond, but not to be. So I'm kind of happy. I felt it was for the best. It was a good acting move, and they didn't take the role. And others, well, you've already heard what I said. James Bolden, I felt would have been a good a date career for him. And you know what I mean? Sam Neeson, I felt that would have been awesome to see him as James Bond, but again, sad to say, not to be. But it's interesting. It's interesting to see actors who originally was going to be Bond, James Bond, and sad to say, never got that look to there. But it's just interesting little ideas of who would have been Bond. It's interesting to have a look who would be Bond today. But you know, I want to talk about other ideas of other actors I would have loved to have had a part, not just being Bond, other actors in other roles, but never got them looks of this. Be an interesting one to look at, but until then, I'll probably talk about other things, other topics, and other things on the way. But until then, be smart, be safe. See you later.